Support comes from the St. Louis Public Library Foundation. During these challenging times, free access to digital resources is a necessity. You can help our community stay connected. Support your St. Louis Public Library at slpl.org.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. This week marked the start of primary season throughout the United States as voters in Texas, North Carolina, and Arkansas cast their ballots in a series of closely watched intra-party contests. In less than 2 weeks, Illinois voters will decide critical primaries for the U.S. Senate, Congress, and various statewide offices. And while there isn't much suspense in some of those races, others are hotly contested and could impact Illinois politics for years, if not decades, to come. Here in studio to preview the land of Lincoln's primary is Will Bauer, who covers all things Metro East for St. Louis Public Radio. Will, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me.
And joining us from afar is Brenden Moore, statehouse reporter for Capital News, Illinois. Brenden, welcome back to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
Great to be back with you, Jason.
Let's start out with the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate, where the main candidates are Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, U.S. Representative Raja Krishnamoorthi, and U.S. Congresswoman Robin Kelly. Will, polling has shown that, I guess, Krishnamoorthi has had a lead, but I think depending on who you look at, it's kind of all over the place. Where is this race right now?
Yeah, I think it very well could be neck and neck. So the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association, who is supporting Stratton in this race, released a poll showing her actually ahead by 3 points. Now, of course, soon after they did that, Krishnamoorthi's campaign released a poll of their own with him leading, of course. And I will point out, though, that we think probably Krishnamoorthi's lead has maybe tightened a little bit over Stratton, but one of the consistent things we're seeing is that Robin Kelly's probably stuck in third, but maybe making a little bit of progress. And of course, campaigns are only releasing the polls that they want to release, and there's not a ton of independent polling. And a poll is maybe just one poll, just a snapshot, 1 point in time, too.
Brenden, during our Politically Speaking interview with Krishnamoorthi, Will asked if the suburban Chicago congressman was possibly peaking too early. Here's his response.
It's nice to lead some polls, but the only poll that counts is March 17th. And that's the day when we find out whether I got the endorsement of the people of Illinois. And so that's really what I'm seeking to do. I'm crisscrossing the state. I think I'm probably the most active by far in terms of visiting, for instance, the St. Louis area, Metro East area. I've been there. I've lost track of the number of times I've visited.
That was Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, a Democrat from suburban Chicago and one of 3 Democratic contenders for Illinois' U.S. Senate seat. Brenden, beyond responding to the congressman, how is Krishnamoorthi trying to stand out compared to Stratton and Kelly?
Yeah, Jason. So Congressman Krishnamoorthi really has been the front runner of this whole race. He was the only one on television for a long time. He kind of had the airways himself for 6 months. And in that messaging, he's kind of portrayed himself as a successor to Senator Dick Durbin, that he's going to represent the whole state, maybe a little bit more moderate in temperament than Stratton or Kelly. He's definitely played up his experience in Congress. He has been in Congress for a decade. Stratton obviously has been a state elected official, but Congress is a whole different beast. But as Will pointed out, there are kind of conflicting polls now that show, Stratton and Krishnamoorthi at least maybe not neck and neck, but it's getting closer. And the Stratton's polling always showed the race a little bit closer than Krishnamoorthi's. So I think really, I guess March 17th, we're going to find out whose benchmark was more correct.
I think one of the reasons why Krishnamoorthi's lead has dwindled is because he's been facing just blistering attacks over the air and in debates over campaign donations connected to the Trump administration, particularly from Stratton. Here is Stratton expounding on that criticism during her Politically Speaking appearance.
If you say that I am going to be someone who stands up to Donald Trump, If I'm someone who says we need to stand up against ICE and the terror in our communities, then accepting money from those sources does not line up or align with those values. I'm not accepting corporate PAC money because I'm going to stand up for the people of Illinois, and those are the values that I have.
That was Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, one of 3 Democratic contenders for Illinois' U.S. Senate seat. Will, do you think that attack is actually working, or is it an example of a candidate grasping for small differences in a race where the candidates really have pretty similar views?
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell. In theory, right, she could be gaining, kind of like we were just talking about. And from a philosophical standpoint, all 3 of these candidates probably do agree on many of the issues, broadly speaking, and there might be minute differences or little differences, and right, you're trying to make them a big deal to show, here's how I'm different. But yeah, there is especially among younger or more progressive Democrats who may be higher propensity voters in the primary, that would entertain the idea of a purity test when it comes to campaign finance. And that's why Stratton has said, I'm not taking corporate PAC money. And you see this in other races with AIPAC money, American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. But of course, Krishnamurthy and Kelly have come right back at Stratton saying, you're not accepting corporate PAC money this cycle, but in previous cycles you did. And also the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association that's supporting you in this race also took money from an ICE contractor. So it's been a mess.
And Brenden, Governor J.B. Pritzker is aiding Stratton by giving to an outside political action committee. And I think that PAC has been the source of attacks against Stratton. Can you kind of explain why having the governor's support is kind of a gift and a curse in this race?
Yeah, it really is a blessing and a curse. So, Stratton really did not have a strong fundraising base, because when you're the lieutenant governor of a billionaire governor who self-funds, you're not doing a lot of fundraising. So she had to start from scratch. State and federal campaign accounts are separate. So, Raja Krishnamurthy started with $18 million in the bank. She started with nothing and has struggled to raise money for her campaign. But there was always kind of an understanding that that super PAC money would come in and help her. There's this Illinois Future PAC, which has spent over $10 million on ads promoting Stratton's candidacy. Governor J.B. Pritzker has donated at least $5 million to that PAC. So she's getting financial support from the governor. She's benefiting from his endorsement. There's an ad that came out this week that really plays up their record in Illinois of them working together. And any poll you'll look at Democratic primary voters in Illinois, J.B. Pritzker is the most popular Democrat in Illinois. So if there is something to be gained by his endorsement, she'll be the one to benefit from that. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of a way where she can say, I don't take corporate PAC money, but it's easy to do that when you're getting indirect assistance from your billionaire governing partner.
The wild card in this race, in my opinion, is Robin Kelly, who has run statewide before for treasurer and served in Congress for over a decade. But Brenden, her campaign does not seem like it's gotten much traction. As Will mentioned, she is in a distant third here. There have been some Stratton supporters who feel like she is purposely in the race to sink Stratton because Kelly is apparently in a tiff with J.B. Pritzker. Why hasn't she been able to gain any traction in this race?
Yeah, similar to Kelly, or similar to Stratton, she hasn't been able to raise a lot of money. She's been way outspent by Krishnamurthy, and she hasn't had the benefit of having a J.B. Pritzker in her corner. As you mentioned, there was a little bit of a tiff a few years ago between the two of them. She ran for state party chair. She beat a Pritzker-backed candidate, and then a year later, a Pritzker-backed candidate defeated her. So they say they're past it, but that's still in the not too distant past. And she's been in this race, and if you talk to the Stratton people, they will tell you that they've tried to portray this as a two-person race between her and Krishnamurthy. They've always said that even when they were way behind in the polls, that once her name recognition gets up, once the ad spending starts, that they think they can beat him because after the millions that he spent, he has a bit of a ceiling. He, even in his own polling, he's only topped out in like low 40s, and a lot of the polling shows him in the 30s. And so they think they can beat him head to head. But obviously, the wild card here is Robin Kelly. Stratton and Kelly are both black women. They both have constituencies on Chicago's south side and in the south suburbs. And the idea is that they could take support away from each other. And there's actually some super PAC spending this week. I believe the Impact Fund, which supports Indian American candidates, they've endorsed Raja Krishnamurthy, but they're running ads in support of Krishnamurthy and Kelly and against Stratton. That tells you a lot about kind of what the strategy is here, because they believe the higher Kelly's number is, the more likely Krishnamurthy will be able to win a split primary.
I do want to be clear, though, that Kelly's has played, I think, a practical role in the race. She's the only candidate that called Israel's invasion of Gaza a genocide. Stratton and Krishnamurthy didn't do that in a debate. And in this clip from Politically Speaking, she's also questioned Stratton's proposal to have a $25 an hour minimum wage.
I don't want to make empty promises or just throw big numbers out like it's realistic, because I've been there 13 years. So I've been there 13 years and only in the majority 4 of those years. So I have a good view of what's realistic and what's not.
That was Congresswoman Robin Kelly on why she doesn't think very highly of Juliana Stratton's call for a $25 an hour minimum wage. Will, do you think this type of criticism is having any effect on the race with Kelly so far behind in the polls?
That's a really good question, and I think it definitely shows that Stratton has tried to couch herself as the strongest fighter of the three. When we asked her, do you think this $25 minimum wage at the federal level is even possible, she said, voters don't want to send someone to Washington, D.C. who's going to settle. They want to, send someone who's going to fight for them. But yeah, the idea that Congress would ever go for a $25 minimum wage up from a $7.25 minimum wage is probably highly unlikely. So Kelly and Krishnamurthy saying, we'd rather go with maybe something more feasible like a $17 per hour, signaling that they're far more practical. But yeah, how does that play with primary voters, I think is a really good question.
Let's go to the GOP primary for governor, where 4 major candidates, Darren Bailey, Ted Dabrowski, Rick Heidner, and James Mendick, are trying to take on Pritzker in the fall. Brenden, this seems like a pretty competitive race to take part in a general election where the GOP will have long odds. How do you see this primary stacking up?
I think that Darren Bailey is going to be the heavy favorite on March 17th. I would not be surprised if that race is called shortly after polls close. There was an effort among some in the Illinois Republican Party, whatever is left of the establishment of the Republican Party, to try to put up another candidate, knowing that Bailey ran last time and lost pretty significantly to Governor Pritzker, had a hard time appealing to voters in the Chicago suburbs and in the city. Hard to appeal to voters in a city you call a hellhole. So there has been an effort to get around a candidate named Ted Dabrowski, who is from a researcher from a conservative publication called WirePoints. He's kind of a wonkier guy. And then you had James Mendick, who's the sheriff of DuPage County, and kind of a surprise entry into the race, Rick Heidner, who's a businessman and video gambling mogul in the state. So Heidner and Dabrowski have raised a little bit of money, have some prominent endorsements, but they're just the vibe that I'm getting, people I talk to, is that it's not really moving the needle. Bailey still has a lot of name recognition, is still very popular. He's the only downstate candidate. About 60% of the vote is probably going to come from downstate in this primary. So he's heavily favored. I would not be surprised if he gets a number close to what he got in the primary last time, which was about 57%.
Will, in the last minute that we have, I think the problem for Republicans is the state's just not as conservative as the national GOP. We talked about it last time that Illinois has a large Latino population that polls say detest what Trump is doing on immigration. What do you think it's going to take for the GOP to dig out of their hole in Illinois?
I think it'll really take someone who's willing to break with the Trump administration and, say, here's where we think they've gone wrong. But that's a really really thin needle to thread in a race where you still need to win the primary, right? And that doesn't look good for the Republican primary base. And I think like Brenden was saying, it'll be really interesting because maybe those three other candidates other than Bailey will kind of split the anti-Bailey vote, but Bailey's probably, going to be the heavy favorite. But whether or not they can do it in 2026, tough year for Republicans anyway.
I was going to say, like, if this was any other year, I would say maybe, because maybe there's some Pritzker fatigue. But I remember 2006 when Rod Blagojevich was extremely unpopular, and he won by 10 percentage points because Republicans were even more unpopular.
And Bailey, like Brenden was just saying, in 2022 came within 12 percentage points. And that, in theory, was going to be a pretty good year for Republicans, or as good as it was going to get.
Well, we'll have to see what happens. There also are a number of competitive congressional primaries in Chicago that Brenden has been following, as well as Nikki Budzinski's primary as well. So if you are into Land of Lincoln politics, be sure to pay attention on March 17th. Will Bauer is St. Louis Public Radio's Metro East reporter. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
And Brenden Moore is with Capital News Illinois and is their statehouse reporter. Brenden, thank you again for coming on today.
Always a pleasure, Jason.
And if you want to learn more about Illinois' March 17th primary, be sure to go to St. Louis Public Radio's voter guide at stlpr.org/voter guide.
Today's episode was produced by Jason Rosenbaum.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations. And leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thanks.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.